Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Monday, October 14th, 2024. It is a new week. I am a new age. And today we are going to talk about balancing ecological goals with production like you do when you turn 42. We'll talk gray hairs, also something you do in your 40s. We'll also get to your messy Monday this week because I forgot it last week. So let's do it. All right, well, I had a good birthday weekend. I coached soccer on Saturday, and both of my teams won. For one of my teams, this was their first win of the season, and it felt really good to hear the cheers go up from the kids when the refs blew the full-time whistle. This may sound weird to people who are not in youth sports, but as a youth soccer coach, winning isn't my focus. Development is. I listen to several soccer coaching podcasts, and they, especially the European coaches, they are always talking about how unfortunate it is that American coaches are often so fixated on winning. Indeed, there are ways to win soccer games that do not develop the entire team to get better, which makes the coach feel good, but does not make for a better team overall, does not improve the kids' playing abilities or understanding of the game. Because that's the goal of youth sports, is to develop the children's skills and their understanding of the game, so they not only improve and get ready for the next league, in this case, middle school, but they also get a lot of opportunities to see their own improvement along the way. For me, I prefer not to have a team that just dominates everyone, because if the kids aren't being challenged, they're not developing as well. That said, on the opposite side, it is a bummer for them to lose every game, especially to their peers, and I hate that for the kids, but winning their first game was probably the best way to show the kids how far they'd come. If you get the development part right, the winning will follow. Probably a farming analogy in there somewhere. Oh, and as of right now, this Friday, there will not be a show. I have an event up in Louisville called the Kentucky Composting Conference. I'll post a link in the show notes. I will be speaking there, and so instead of just putting out a rebroadcast of an old episode or old interview that I did, I have decided if I can't do a show, I just won't do a show. I debated this for a while, but then I realized that I don't personally care for rebroadcasts when my favorite shows do them, unless there are substantial updates to the story, which maybe once I can afford to hire a producer, we can do that sort of stuff. But rather, I usually just prefer to use that time to catch up on other podcasts when my favorite podcasts are doing rebroadcasts. Also, this isn't a radio station where the space has to be filled, so why force it? If I can randomly get a daily done this week, an extra one, I will, but otherwise expect no show this Friday. If you want a show, I suppose you'll have to come to the composting conference in Louisville. It is a great town if you've never been. I mean, the Speed Art and the Louisville Slugger museums on their own are enough, plus it's the home of Racing Louisville, so official women's professional soccer team of No-Till Market Gardeners, who lost this weekend, but they play Portland Thorns on Saturday. So perfect. There's your plans. Good news is that I do think there will be a regular Farmer Jesse video for you YouTube folks that Sunday. Hopefully it'll make up for that Friday a little bit. Oh, and I keep forgetting to mention this, but my next event of the conference season, one that I will be in person after this composting one, is coming up in Evansville, Indiana on November 16th. I will link that and all the other stuff that I'm talking about in the show notes. I am not doing many farm conferences this year, which I say every year, but I kind of mean it this time. So if you want to see me in person, you will have to jump on one of the conferences I announce here in the coming weeks, like this one in Indiana or the Kentucky Composting Conference. I love conferences, but I don't love being away from my family. So yeah, I'm keeping them minimal and mostly sticking to some places and events that I have not done before. Like any good daily farming show would do on a Monday, I want to kick today's show off with talking about hair and specifically gray hair. Obviously, I have some gray hair and have been growing gray since I was 19, and it's honestly never really bothered me. When I first discovered my gray hairs, and at that young age at 19, I was like, cool, I'm going to look like Richard Gere. Unfortunately, that never really happened, though to be fair, at the time, Richard Gere would have been in his early 50s and not 40s, so I still have some years to keep drying, but my hair did turn gray pretty fast, and it has been majority gray for a while now. Recently, though, I came across a New York Times article called "Can Stress Actually Turn Your Hair Gray?" And I learned some interesting things that I didn't have anywhere else to share them. So to your good fortune, I have a show where I get to talk for half an hour on basically whatever I want. So that's fun. And since I'm a farmer, clearly all of it relates to farming. So first, hair goes gray in general because cells called melanocytes, I think that's how you pronounce it, which every hair follicle has and gives the follicle its color. When those get damaged or decrease somehow, that's when your hair starts turning gray. Pigments in our hair help protect us from the sun. So it's a bit of a bummer to lose those, but it also generally happens at around 40 or 50 years old for most people when those cells do not regenerate quite as fast. So graying has also become a symbol of aging. And there are many factors for what causes the graying, from diseases to genetics to medical conditions or alcohol. Considering the drinking habits of my 20s and 30s, I felt seen with that one. And an over or underactive thyroid, but is stress among the factors that cause gray hair? That's kind of what this article wanted to attack. First, it's really hard to test this sort of stuff because you can't ethically subject people to stress. And like many diet studies, you are often relying on self-reporting, which is by and large not all that accurate. This is why human health is so hard to study. You can't control the conditions, the food intake, etc., for long periods of time with any sort of reliability. But there is some evidence that stress can also contribute to graying, and I really love the design of one of the studies, albeit too small to really glean much of a result from. And again, it relies on self-reporting, but basically the researchers used the hair follicles of 14 volunteers, which super small sample size, but they had the volunteers write down the stressful events in their lives over the last year. And then, and I'm just going to quote the author of this article here, quote, "The scientists then created high-resolution digital images of the hairs and calculated when each strand went gray using estimates of how quickly hair grows." The article continues, "They also asked the participants to plot out stressful experiences from the past year on a timeline and rank them from least to most distressing. The researchers found that when a strand turned gray, frequently corresponded with the most stressful moment of that volunteer's previous year," end quote. But it does not seem like the graying from stress is necessarily permanent. Like I said, there are a lot of other factors from genetics to diet to health conditions and so on. And this is a small study too, but I feel like you could extend this study to thousands of farmers, and if the gray matched up with July through September, in the Northern Hemisphere at least, you might be onto something. Yeah, solve your problem, scientists. All right, in the next segment, we are going to get questions from our Patreon members on the subject of balancing ecological goals with making a living. BRB. Today's episode is brought to you by Rimmel Greenhouses.
Whether it's tomatoes to market, flowers in the spring, or your family's harvest, growing in a greenhouse protected from the weather provides the right environment that you need for a harvest that you can count on. Rimmel greenhouses are designed for durability and offer the quality that you need to grow productively year-round. Visit rimmelgreenhouses.com to get a quote today.
If I may editorialize for a second, I own a Rimmel tunnel. I love it. We built it ourselves, and I really appreciated the quality of the tunnel as well as the customer service we received in the process. So make sure to check them out. If you, the listener, want to support our work, you can do so at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to those Patreon questions. You can join for as little as $2 a month. And to be frank, there are a lot of beginning and new farmers who can't afford another expense. So if you are someone who can, and you think this information or show is valuable, consider chipping in. Anyway, today's question comes from Patreon member Kajukanen Slavin, who I should say has been a longtime supporter and offered many great insights over the years, despite me, no doubt, just butchering his name. Kajukanen writes, "My biologist side can't help but ask about biodiversity in farming, conflicts, synergy, solutions. I aim for that sweet spot between creating a habitat for all the critters that desperately need shelter from habitat loss and chemicals and actual crop production. Been working hard on this for about 7 seasons now at a pretty challenging spot in Massif, central of France. Would be happy to hear other people's experiences. Thank you all." Okay, so great question. I think this is one of those challenges that a lot of us face because we want to do the best we can by the environment and the local ecology while also making a living. I mean, we don't really have a choice. We have to make money to farm and live. That's the way the world is set up. And sometimes that does require some amount of compromise, some minimal use of plastics, some light tillage, something. And I don't have a perfect answer for how to manage that balance because it will be different in everyone's context. What is your market? What are you growing? Can you do whatever you want on that land, or are there restrictions? What type of soil? all that stuff. But here are some things I've learned over the years that may be broadly applicable. One, you have to make money, not just to survive as a business, but to do more ecological management. Like solar, that takes money to install. Trees and shrubs cost money to plant and cost money to maintain. There are some cost-sharing grants and such that can help through the NRCS, but there will still likely be an expense there, if only in preparation and upkeep. Moreover, building ponds and planting trees and creating habitat and etc. will take up space. So there is a cost there as well, perhaps, especially for those working on limited acreage. So if you do not make money, you cannot do those things or do many of them or do more of them. As to the second thing I've learned, dogma ain't the solution. In other words, being dogmatic about how we manage the soil, specifically saying that this is the only right way, or being dogmatic about how we manage the environment, won't necessarily get you to the point that you are both making money and increasing ecological health. Absolutely, there's a value to having ideals and standards, and you should try to not compromise those. But also you should be open to managing the soil in the way your specific situation, your context, calls for. If I could say that in a less vague way, I would use tillage as a good example. Let's say you don't want to till your soil because you have heard through us and or others what tillage does to soil ecology, but you are working with heavily depleted, compacted soils that really could use an injection of good compost, plus perhaps biochar and some other soil goodies to get started. Don't skip that initial opportunity to work those things into the soil that could ultimately benefit the gardens for the long haul, just because that what you learned about tillage, that it harms the soil. As I'm often saying, we try to avoid tillage because we want to protect the life and carbon in our soils, but if there is no real life or large amounts of carbon in your soil, then put something there worth protecting and protect it. In other words, work some compost and other goodies into the soil, build your beds, and then never have to really work it again. That will likewise get you to a more productive place faster. There are videos all over our YouTube channel about how to determine if a one-time tillage is the right approach for you. I have done both never till and tillage approaches, and if you do the never till approach right, the soil will eventually come around. But if you are dealing with rough soils, it may take a few years, which could mean tens of thousands of dollars in lost production. And yes, I know other farmers say different things. They've had success just doing never till, and that's not because other farmers are wrong, but because other farmers have different experiences. But again, after 15 years and 5 different farms, I feel confident in saying dogma doesn't help you grow food. Ask the soil what it needs via soil tests and observations, and then go from there. Plastics are another area where a balance must be struck. We try to use the least amount of plastics that we can on our farm, but it's hard to do things like irrigate without plastic. It is hard to harvest without it, to grow food into the winter without it, and especially to package produce without it. Plastic bags save untold amounts of food waste every year, and I often feel we are exceedingly hard on farmers about using plastic and not hard enough on other industries who just use it seemingly for goofs. Legos, for instance. My kids love Legos, but do the plastic Legos need to come in plastic one-time use packages? I mean, one of my absolute least favorite things is bags and bags, where you go to the grocery store to buy a bag of, coffee, and they give you a bag to carry it in. I know people hate when the law intervenes, but bringing your own bags to the grocery store, that should be mandatory. Yes, because of things like microplastics in our soils and foods and leaching from things like phthalates, farmers need to be more conscientious and minimalist about how and where they employ plastics, especially against the soil. But there is a way to use them that enables farmers to reduce their weed populations, grow food, and extend the life of that food. There are other things that may challenge our ability to strike the right balance there, such as how much fossil fuel we're using or broad spectrum pesticides, even organic ones. But I think the ultimate answer to your question, Kajukanen, is to establish a plan or a set of goals for your farm and local ecology. Businesses need business plans, and ecological farms need business plans with ecological goals. This could be a one-sentence addendum to your business plan that says, in 3 years, we will have established X, and in 5 years, I want to have established Y, and etc. If you genuinely want to achieve ecological goals, it should be a regular part of your crop planning as well. You plan your crops, and then based on your ecological goals, you plan your ecological contributions, i.e. in March, we will plant these specific trees, and in the fall, we will establish these shrubs and dig a pond or whatever. As you get better at the gardening stuff and make more money, then you will find more time and funds and capacity to accomplish your ecological goals, the ones you put in your crop and business plan. Yes, we should reduce our impact, reduce our plastic use and all that stuff, but we should also make sure to set our goals and try to achieve them. Anyway, I hope that was helpful, and I look forward to reading your smart contributions in the comments section as always. If you have a question you would like me to tackle, or at least ramble about on this show, please go to patreon.com/no-till-growers and find that October show thread. Up next, we'll get a quick break, and then we'll do a Messy Monday that actually relates to the question. So it's kind of extending the question. Yeah, be right back. Hey, you all, Farmer Jesse here. So our work has always been about keeping farming information as free and open to the public as we possibly can, and that won't change. One way in which we make that possible, though, is through advertising on podcasts like this, on our YouTube channel, on our forum, and so on. So if you are a small farm-related company selling seeds or tools or something growers could use, or if you're an organization putting on some conference or offering a grant or something else farm-related that I'm not thinking of, get in touch with us at farmermichelle@no-till-growers.com. That's farmermichelle@no-till-growers.com. Supporting us helps to grow this work and grow farmers, so we all thank you. Again, that email is farmermichelle@no-till-growers.com, or you can find our contact information at no-till-growers.com. All right. Thanks, you all. Enjoy the show. All right, it is Monday, which means Messy Monday, which, yes, I already forgot about last week in the second week of this show, which itself bodes well for the future of me starting traditions. Yeah. So anyway, this week's Messy Monday is about an interplanting trial I did that shows potential, but is not quite there yet. This is actually a bit of an update on a video I did where I discussed this particular trial, which I'll post a link to in the show notes. First, I like interplanting a lot, but it also adds a whole other level of complication and complexity and is not a necessity at all times. In line with the last segment, not every bed has to have multiple different crop species at once, even though, yes, diversity is good for the soil. There is just a point at which it can really, really complicate matters, and neither crop will do that well necessarily. The ideal interplantings do not affect either crop negatively. Like planting beets or lettuce underneath tomatoes when they're young, I never have an issue with that so long as the tomato transplants are still young when you put them in and you transplant, not directly so, the lettuce or beets next to them at the same time. The tomatoes grow fine, plus the beets and lettuce do well, and those are removed before the tomatoes really take over the bed and start shading them out or needing the space. Lately, I have been interplanting my tunnel tomatoes in April into carrot beds that I sowed in January to mokum. Mokum is the name of the variety, and it takes about 60 days to mature. Carrots come out before the tomatoes really take over the bed, and it's a nice little relay. But anyway, the trial I want to talk about or update you on is that a few years back, I accidentally seeded fennel and lettuce into the same block. I blame this on the lettuce having obnoxiously camouflaged seeds. But anyway, after a few days, we started to see both crops germinate, and I thought, well, clearly we'll have to plant these and see what happens, right? And well, we got heads of lettuce, and then a couple weeks later, we got fennel. Now, there was a lot of awkwardness about this because sometimes cutting a lettuce head, you would damage or cut a fennel bulb entirely off. And also, I do not sell an nth of the amount of fennel as I do lettuce, so the utility for this pairing was low. But I saw some potential in the idea of double seeding, using one soil block, we use soil blocks on our farm, one soil block to get two crops, thus cutting both planting labor and blocking labor in half. Oh, if only the world were so simple. So what I did was I started trialing this with crops I could use more of. I started working with dill and cilantro and seeding all of our head lettuces with those seeds as well. Unfortunately, the herbs often outcompeted the lettuces or vice versa, and the yields of both were diminished. I also tried just sowing cilantro under lettuce that I was about to transplant, but there must be some allelopathic effect from the cilantro going on because it slowed down the lettuce by at least a week, if not two. And now it is basically a weed, also called a mess. Perfect for today. So I'm not totally abandoning this idea of double seeding. I feel like there may be, or there must be a combo out there that makes sense, or maybe I need to be pairing longer season crops, more like fennel, but maybe something like parsley that I could use more of. Maybe that would work with lettuces or with even shorter crops. In reality, those sorts of double croppings, like the famous radish and carrot sowing, for instance, where you sow the two together have never really worked that well for me. And even indigenous pairings like corn and beans and squash are often traditionally and strategically sown at different times to maximize the growth and speed of each crop. So by and large, I recommend sticking to the pairings that work well, like those outlined in the Living Soil Handbook, which, when you get it from no-tillgrowers.com, supports our work, or just practicing a longer game view of soil diversity where you are getting multiple crop species in a bed over the course of the same year as opposed to the same time. I'm not a huge fan of planting the same crop species in the same bed multiple times in a season, but I will talk about that another day because there's a lot of interest in that idea that growing the same crops improves the microbial populations for that specific species, which in short, maybe it does, but it also increases your risk of disease for those crops. So it's not generally a good idea. Anyway, again, I'll talk about that another day. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap it up there. If you are watching this on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Also, I'd love to see where you are listening. Tag us in your field or office, in a post or in your stories on Instagram this week and show us what you're up to and where you're listening to me rant about gray hairs. We're No-Till Growers on Instagram, or just let us know in the comments or wherever you let people know things. That is very fun for us. Shout out to Willie Breeding for the theme music and the crew at No-Till Growers for all their support. Jackson, Michelle, Michael, you all rock. And all of the hosts, you all are amazing. Every day of October, I am shouting out new members of the Patreon page who make this show possible at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, and those who just bump up from one level to another as well. I would love to get at least one new member every day. As the old adage goes, one can never have enough names to butcher. Maybe I made that adage up. I don't remember. I do a lot of talking. Our Patreon members are killing it with questions. So if you want your question answered, that's the place to go to ensure it happens. So big shout outs today to, this is gonna be awesome, Tom, Ben Hymick Snipes, Hymick? That's probably right. Mike at Think Little Farm, Cheryl White, David Bunnell, Heather Boyd, and Neil Gunhold. Man, one of the things I love about looking at our Patreon page is a lot of people, not everybody, but some people have the little avatars. And like, I'm not trying to judge people on how they look, but definitely have some good nerds following here. Love it, you all. All right. Thanks for watching and or listening. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.